After the Caesars, I was exhausted. It was 3.5 hours, four hours, and I don't know any French. Next time I will have to learn some, but I sat for 3.5 hours not having a clue. The only thing I recognized was the name Cliff Martinez and Harrison Ford's speech. So I sat there for 3.5 hours. I've never sat for such an extended period of time feeling so that ignorant. Thank you. But I was very honored and flattered to be, to be nominated. I have never had that kind of recognition in all the years I've worked in Hollywood. So to have done 2 pictures and have both films nominated for Caesars was quite an honor. So it was an exciting moment for me, and I was absolutely terrified that I might actually win and have to go up and speak in front of a crowd in English. So it was a very exciting moment for me. Alexander Desplat is huge in America now. He's very popular. So I'm familiar with his work somewhat. I wasn't familiar with The Prophet. I haven't seen that. And as to the other films, I had no awareness, no knowledge of who the competition was, which is fine, just as well. I don't want to know who beat me, but no, I don't know their work. Every director is different, but I thought that Xavier and Nicolas shared something in common that I thought I'll just call French for lack of a better description. But I thought both filmmakers had a similar approach, maybe almost like Soderbergh. That they were very they didn't have characters that were very emotionally demonstrative. They were very restrained emotionally, and they both wanted the music to be also restrained and not make a big deal of itself dramatically. But I can't really generalize about French directors versus Americans. The films, both Espions and A l'Origine, struck me as unique films in that I saw them both and thought these would never be popular films in America. They're too slow, they're too intelligent, and they give the audience too much credit for having to draw their own conclusions. But both were among my best film experiences, I think. I didn't realize it at the time, but I think Steven is probably very influenced by, I don't know about French cinema specifically, but his films feel very European. They feel like foreign films in certain ways. So I see the similarity. In fact, my reaction to Sex, Lies, and Videotape was kind of similar to the way I felt with Espions and A l'Origine, which was good films. I wonder who's going to watch them. I wonder who the audience is. I thought it would be a very small audience, and was surprised because all 3 films turned out to be very popular. But they didn't strike me as commercial films. Mostly because they were just too... They let the audience think too much. They made the audience get involved and draw their own conclusions and think for themselves what the film was about. Sex, Lies, and Videotape I thought was very ambiguous, and I thought that made it uncommercial, but it's what made it so successful. And I assume the same with these films. Either that or the French audience is a little smarter than I expected, or a little smarter than the American audience. Maybe shouldn't put that in there. Well, that's my background. That's my childhood, is playing drums in rock bands. And at a certain point, I just didn't like the sound of drums anymore, and kind of gave it up. But yeah, I don't use rhythm that much, and most of my early stuff with Steven Soderbergh was purposely not rhythmic. And so, no, I don't use it a lot. And I don't see much connection between my rock and roll past and my movie career. They're kind of 2 different things. it's not like I have a lot of projects to choose from and I pick the best. The projects often choose me. Yeah, I wish it were otherwise, but usually I choose something that I feel I'm well cast for, that I can do, bring something to the film that I can contribute. I like to do something that's a little bit different than what I've done in the past. There's a lot of reasons for doing a film, I guess. To develop a relationship, like I hope to become the Jerry Lewis of film composers in France. A script is usually something I look at. Sometimes there's a rough cut of the film to look at. That gets kind of tricky if somebody shows you their film and then you say, I don't want to do it. Then their feelings are hurt. So usually I'll read a script and usually talk to the director, and he'll decide if he likes me and if I like them. And I guess that's usually, the script is probably the bottom line. If somebody likes me, I'm very impressed. If somebody likes me and thinks I'm appropriate, I'm very flattered to know that. So usually I don't say no very often. That's a good quality. I mean, I think you have to be very much in a role of support. You can't have too much of an ego because you get beat up a lot. Your music is something very personal, and it might take you a week to write this beautiful piece of music, and a director will listen to 2 notes and go, no, it's all wrong. So you have to develop, I've always thought it's like raising children. It's like if your daughter turns 18 and she wants to marry an abusive drug addict, alcoholic, you just kind of have to let it go, because you do your best with the music and then it's going to pass on to hands that are less sympathetic. So you have to develop be very passionate about the music when you're making it, and then become very detached. Erase that. That was the analogy about the abusive drug addict was. I mean, all the time I get that directors like to work with temp music, and some composers hate it. I'm fine with it, as long as the director knows that you're not going to recreate. The only time it really becomes a problem usually is if it's my music. Then they might expect something very, very similar, and they've hired you because you've got that, the sound of Traffic or Solaris, and they want that sound. So sometimes that's tough, but if it's temped with Thomas Newman or somebody else, they know that I can't sound like that. So then it's easier because I can fail to imitate the music in an interesting way that sounds like me. Whereas if it's temped with me, they want it to sound like me. And sometimes that's hard because I forgot how I did it. Well, I think I'm not an orchestral composer for the most part. I've done a lot of electronic scores. So to me, most of the stuff, the demos, I guess you'd call it demos, are very, very close to what the final music will sound like. It's only with the orchestra that there's a big change, that you do everything synthetically and then there's an orchestra. But the music technology has gotten to the point where the orchestral demos that you make with samples and computers are very, very close to what the orchestra will sound like. So there's not that much of a shock. So to me, the demos are preparation for the final product. The demos that I did for A la Origine I thought were so good that I was a little bit nervous when the guys from Europa came to Los Angeles to hear the orchestra, that it might not sound as good. That I was thinking maybe the demo shouldn't sound that good, so that when they hear the orchestra they'll be very, very impressed. But yeah, the electronic demos are getting scary because they sound so realistic to me, at least the way that I write. I think you can come very close to sounding like human beings. My favorite guy of the last few years has been Louis Armstrong. He's my all-time favorite. Captain Beefheart, who I got to work with, is one of my favorites. Debussy I like, Ligeti I like. Those are the symphonic guys. Film score guys, I like Harry Gregson Williams a lot. Thomas Newman, of course. Of the old guys, I love Bernard Herrmann. I think he's the original minimalist. And I grew up on rock and roll. So, you know, the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath. Those are sort of the people that inspired me to get into music. So rock and roll is kind of where I came from. Yeah, I like working with other people. At first I wanted to do it all myself. Now I work with other people quite a bit. And
What for?
what for?
Yeah.
To make it more fun, to get it done on time, to get ideas when I don't have when I'm uninspired. You know, originally I played in rock bands, and I wanted to get into film music so I can get away from the collaborative process and do it all myself. And then over the years, I kind of realized that there's a certain synergy between two people that you don't get when you're working alone. So sometimes I like to do everything myself, but I also enjoy working with others. And particularly when I do things that I'm not really strong at, like the orchestra. It's not my background. So when I do something that's very orchestral, I do rely on other people that know the orchestra a little bit better than I do to help flesh things out. And then when you work with musicians also, like I'm not going to sit down and play drums anymore because it's been 15 years since I've really played. I play a little bit of guitar, a little bit of keyboard. But so you collaborate with musicians a lot, and I think it's just a lot more fun.